It's haircut time. Now, I probably need one too, but so do the plants. So today we are going to go through how I chop and propagate my plants and make lots of little baby plants and grow my plant collection. You're going to need the plants, sharp secateurs, alcohol wipes, or something to disinfect the secateurs, propagating medium, and I think that's about it. So let's go through nodes and chopping a plant. Now, nodes are a bud of the plant, and it's an area where there's a lot of cellular activity and where new stem or new leaves or new flowers grow from. Now, to propagate, you are going to need to have a node. So in this video, I'm covering climbers and node plants. I'll do another video on rhizome splitting and propagation when you actually have to depot and get in and chop the roots and things like that. But today will just be the climbers and the trailing plants that have super visible nodes. Now, as I said, the node is where the plant will root from, where it will grow new stem from. So you need a node. There are some exceptions. Some plants, like for example succulents, begonia, they can actually grow, you can propagate them from just a leaf, but that's rare. You do generally need a node, not just a piece of stem or a leaf, for example. There is a node. We can see little aerial roots coming out of that already. That's another node right there. There's actually a really long root coming out of that one. Now, if we were to get something like the Philodendron Brazil, so the nodes are basically next to each leaf. That there is a node. On the other side of that is a leaf. That there is another node. So you're going to need one of these nodes to actually propagate the plant. Here, there are no nodes there. So cutting a portion of stem like that is not going to help us. We would need a portion of stem with a node on it to propagate something. With this one, that is a node there. So it's basically a raised bump. It might have aerial roots coming out of it, it might not. Now, you don't actually need leaves on the stem. You've got just a whole bunch of stem without any leaves. Perhaps the leaves have fallen off, but you do have some nodes on that portion of stem. You can actually just chop that stem and that stem will grow into a new plant. You're going to have to decide a propagating medium. And I guess it's really personal preference which one you use. My preference is just plain old water. I find that water's great because you don't have to worry about over or under watering. You can check the progress. You can literally just set and forget. Well, you have to check the water level because it will evaporate and you got to make sure that node is still covered with water. But water's just super easy. Comes out of the tap. I use filtered just because I have a filtered tap, but you can use tap water. If filtered's available, go for that. I guess the major con is that the plant will have to transition from water roots to soil roots, so you will need to keep it damp for more damp than you usually would for 2 to 3 weeks after planting, just to let those roots transition and for the plant to get used to soil. But water is always my preference, with the exception of thick, chunky cuttings, because if you have like a really thick, woody stem, the chance of it rotting is pretty high in water. So I just put that straight in soil. And for any cutting, you can put it straight in soil. A major pro is that it doesn't have to adapt to a new medium. If you plan to grow it in soil, you can just, plant it, look after it like any other plant, but you will have to make sure that you're keeping the moisture levels correct. So you're not overwatering and you're not underwatering. And when cuttings are growing, you do have to keep it a bit more moist to let it develop roots, but you can't water it too much because then it'll rot. So soil is a little bit harder. I guess they're probably my two preferred, depending on what I'm doing. You can use something like sphagnum moss. Sphagnum moss is great, plants love it. But again, I guess the major downsides to that is keeping the moisture right. So you don't want it too damp because you don't want to rot the cutting, and you can't keep it too dry, otherwise the cutting won't root and it'll dry out and die. Sphagnum and other materials also have, like peat and things like that, have a pretty high environmental footprint. So not only is it more expensive because you have to buy a whole new material, it's also got those environmental considerations too. Perlite, and you got to go out and buy something, and you know, it's extra money, extra resources, so up to you really. Leca is another one, so filling, like say, a glass with water and putting leca through it, I don't really see the need. Yes, it does look cool, but it's essentially, in my opinion, just water. So, and leca is not the cheapest. I'm not sure about the environmental footprint of leca, but I just don't think it's necessary when you can pop the cutting straight in water. And perlite and sphagnum moss and leca, they still all have those transition issues for when you want to plant your plant. So they're just some things to weigh up. End of the day, it's personal preference. You could try a few, see which one you prefer, which one I guess works for you better, and go from there. So make sure you've got a sharp pair of secateurs and disinfect them before starting. I use these alcohol wipes. I got them for $1.50 from Bunnings. It's a pack of 100 wipes, and I find them just really easy and convenient. I'm going to be honest and admit that I don't clean these between every chop. However, if it was a very fussy or delicate or expensive plant, I would, but just to minimize the use of resources, as I said before, I wouldn't be wiping them between each chop for each on the same plant. Now, I'm basically just going to chop at each node. Bend that leaf back. Nope, I've somewhat broken the leaf, but we'll see how we go. These ones are a little bit tricky to get into sometimes. There we go. That is the first chop. So we've got that node there with some really fleshy, healthy looking aerial roots there. That should develop roots quite nicely, and we've got 2 leaves on the top there, so that's a tip cutting. Now I'm going to chop it at this next node. So that's that cutting there. So you really don't need a whole heap of stem or anything like that, because if you think about it, when you're planting it, you're going to need to stick this into soil. So if you have a huge long stem, you're going to need a deep pot, and look, it's just really not necessary. So I'll just continue chopping this guy. So that'll be it for this one. You can actually see that if we take it out of the pot, we could probably further split it, because it looks like these are 2, possibly 3 neat areas of the plant, but I'm just going to leave that one as it is now. And so we got 1, 2, 3, 4 cuttings off that, so we're going to be able to grow 4 more plants. So that's a tip there. That's a stem cutting because that's just got a portion of stem. It's got a leaf on it. Again, stem cutting, and then another stem cutting, just a portion of the stem. So that is the Sigonium batik all chopped. Now we are going to be able to get a lot of cuttings from this Brazil because it is huge. I'm just going to alcohol wipe my secateurs. If you're wanting to do a longer cutting, you can actually take the leaves off. So I think what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to let that node be, and I'm going to take this leaf off here because you don't want leaves in water. And I'm actually going to put this node in water. There's that guy there. Now, if you wanted to do a few nodes, so say you wanted to include 2 or 3 nodes on a cutting, you would take the bottom leaves off and then propagate it just like this. So I'm just going to go ahead and chop this guy, and then we'll move on. Now I'm going to take a longer cutting too to give it a bit of a head start on being a bigger plant. So I'm going to leave this developing node 1, 2, 3 leaves, and then I will chop this leaf off here, and that's the node that I will propagate from. So once it develops roots, I can just plant this relatively large segment of plant already, and it'll be a decent size. Again, I have cleaned my secateurs, and then we're just going to chop this one in exactly the same manner. Given how much thicker and more, I guess, woody this stem is, I'm not actually going to put it straight in water. I'm going to let it callus over. It's really hot today, so given that it's not too thick, I'm probably only going to leave it for about 2 hours, but there's no hard and fast rule about callusing. Callusing the cutting first and letting it heal at its injury point, especially when it's a thicker stem, will reduce the chance of it rotting or getting diseases and things like that. So it's a good idea when you're dealing with a thicker stem. See how that's super fleshy and wet? Definitely leaving that to callus over. We'll check it in a couple hours to see if it has healed and sealed itself off. If not, I'll leave it for longer. Now this one has a lot going on. It actually has quite a bit. It looks like a new growth point potentially there or there, not sure yet. So I might actually just leave this one flat when I try and propagate. Now, as I said, the horsehead philodendron is going to callus over, but we got 7 cuttings of that one. We've got quite a few cuttings of the batik, and we've got heaps of cuttings of the philodendron Brazil. Now, the way that I propagate is just make sure that the nodes that I want it to root from are covered and the leaves are out of the water. So that's basically all there is to it. You will thank yourself if you get yourself a set of propagating glasses and different sizes for different types of cuttings. I don't know what I would do without my propagating glass collection, to be completely honest. But yeah, I've just bunched a whole lot of them together. Now it's just going to be set and forget. I'm going to, after those have calloused over, they're going in water too. And then I am going to put them on a bright windowsill and just let them be. And check them about every couple of days just to make sure water hasn't evaporated and that the nodes are still covered in water. That's just a really simple way to propagate. It has been a pretty foolproof method for me. The only time it hasn't worked is when I've been trying to save a plant, and even then 9 times out of 10 it does work. So if you've got root rot or anything like that on these plants, like vining, trailing plants, you can definitely just chop and propagate what's left of the plant if the root system is beyond saving. So that's just a really simple way to propagate. If we wanted to get precise and technical, I'm sure that we could. This is just a simple way to start growing your plant family, and I mean, obviously designed for beginners. So I hope that that has really helped some of you know where to start. And until next time, happy propagating. Bye guys.